Welcome to Coaching with Confidence and Care podcast, inspired by common topics that arise in coach training, mentoring, and supervision. I am Dr. Luba Desamidze, the founder of Upthink Coaching. I'm an active coach trainer, mentor, and supervisor. If you are listening, you are probably looking to deepen your skills as a coach. I hope this podcast will be a helpful resource for you and contributes to your journey. Today, let's talk about emotions in coaching. As a mentor coach and a supervisor, I regularly see coaches who are less familiar with emotion work in coaching or are not sure to what extent emotions belong in coaching. For example, a common question that I hear from many coaches is, how do I know when emotions are something to explore in coaching? And when is it more of a therapy thing? So let's start this conversation today. And if you have any further questions, feel free to contact me. I'd be very happy to record another episode about more nuanced emotion work if there is a need. In this episode, my goal is to raise some of the common questions that I hear from coaches around emotions and working with emotions, some real examples that I've collected from my mentor coaching sessions or from coaching supervision that I deliver. I will respond to those questions. I'll share my own thinking and experience around this topic. I will provide some questions you could use in your own sessions to address emotions with your clients. And I will also support my ideas with evidence from the ICF core competencies, which inform my work. Some popular questions I get from coaches are, I get confused whether I should work with emotion, address them, or not touch upon them at all, because they're more of a therapeutic territory and we are not allowed to go into that. And then how can I make it okay for clients to feel something in a session without turning it into a therapy style talk? Another common question is, when a client gets emotional, am I supposed to just acknowledge it or actually explore what's behind it? And what is my role as a coach in those moments when emotions show up? Do I stay curious? Do I just hold space for it? Or do I suggest that the conversation moves forward because we have a session goal and all that? Then there's also this question, how do I know as a coach when to follow that thread and when to leave it? How can I tell when a client's emotions are getting too intense and it might be better to pause or suggest other support? So this is more around the ethical discernment and boundaries. In order to understand better what we deal with, let me start with a short distinction between emotion and feeling. Very often these words are used interchangeably, although they don't mean exactly the same thing. As you might know, emotion starts in different parts of the brain that work together, and when those brain areas become active, they create emotional reactions, such as fear, joy, anger, curiosity, or more nuanced emotions. An emotion is a complex reaction pattern that includes what we feel inside, how our body reacts, and how we express or behave in response. Emotions often show up when something feels personally meaningful or important to us. They are how we respond to situations that truly matter. And feeling is the result of an emotion. It's the conscious experience of those emotional signals. When we notice those reactions and become aware of them, that's what a feeling is. Now, why is it important to understand the basic mechanism of emotions? Because as coaches, we don't just work with reasoning, logics, or rationalization. Yes, we do work a lot with the logical element of the message that our client is sharing with the content element, but emotional and feeling processes work hand in hand with thinking, language, and behavior. Every emotional experience has three parts: a subjective experience, what it feels like on the inside, physiological response, how our body reacts, and a behavioral or expressive response, how we show or act on it. See, each emotion provides a lot of information, and working with emotions can help our clients reach alignment between their inner and outer stories, between their inner and outer worlds. Now let me say it loud and clear that emotions and emotion work absolutely belong in coaching. They are true signals of meaning, motivation, and value. In the ICF language, coaches acknowledge and support the client's expressions of feelings as part of understanding who the client is, not as something to fix or even interpret. It's very common for us as coaches to work with verbal information, right? And emotion is nonverbal information that emerges in our coaching sessions. Coaches are trained in active listening, and there is no resistance in exploring words or metaphors. I'm sure you would address a limiting belief or a strong label that a client uses towards themselves in their narrative. So in a very similar way, you can address the emotion as a nonverbal information that a client expresses about themselves or the situation. So here's a key thought, that we use emotions as coaches to address the who of the client, to help the client understand themselves holistically and avoid creating this kind of a split when we only listen to the rational part of the client message and then we support them in ignoring the emotional part of the message. So this type of work would not be helpful to the client. If we turn to the MCC minimum skills requirements, and that is the most advanced coaching credential in the ICF system, the MCC minimum skills requirements say that what's essential is the coach's ability to hear on multiple levels, including both the emotional and substantive content of the words, and also the coach's ability to hear underlying beliefs, thinking, creating and learning that are occurring for the client. At MCC level, the minimum standard of skill is that a coach listens as a learner and listens at the logical and emotional level at the same time. So this is very, very straightforward. Now, the key distinction between coaching and therapy in regard to emotion work would be the focus and type of work. I often mention that I use therapy regularly as a personal mental hygiene routine. And from the client's perspective, I certainly see distinctions in how these two modalities approach emotion. Coaching works with the emotions, their meanings, and functions in the present and future. For example, what they reveal, where they point, what additional information they communicate, while therapy works with the origin and past conditioning of those emotions, and we do not go there as coaches. Our coaching mindset sees emotions as data for awareness. When a client expresses emotion, then we use curiosity to help them name what the emotion signals rather than understand the cause. A coach could ask a question like, "What is this emotion telling you about what matters right now?" And a therapist might ask a question like, "What is your earliest memory of that emotion? When did it first occur? What happened?" Now, if your client is looping or reliving emotional pain without any insight or moving forward, it may be time for us to pause. That's when coaching risks crossing into processing trauma, which is definitely outside our scope. And in such situations, you can share a gentle observation, not cutting the client off, of course, respecting and acknowledging their feelings and their right to have this feeling, reminding them and giving them the sense that it's a safe space and they do not have to suppress the emotion. You could say something like, "I'm noticing we are circling around this feeling. How is it for you to be here right now? What would be most helpful right now?" If it's getting to a stronger loop and your client starts recalling past stories or you see they're stepping into the past, they cannot move forward, you can gently bring up alternative paths for them to work, saying something like, "Would it support you more to explore this with a therapist while we focus on how you'd like to move forward from here in our coaching session?" In order to keep the conversation in the coaching mode, you can always anchor back to your client's goals. You could ask questions like, "How does this feeling connect to what you want to create or change?" Or "How does this feeling inform what you want to do next?" "What is this emotion telling you about your next step?" Or "What insight does this give you about the change you want?" Such questions could restore the focused orientation of the conversation. See, as a coach, you don't always have to do something with an emotion. And I guess in this episode, when I refer to emotions, I specifically refer to difficult, conflicting, intense emotions that are hard for the client to process. I don't really talk about excitement or happiness or any light positive emotions, because coaches usually don't have a challenge with those, right? Many coaches do feel challenged when difficult or complex emotions arise. And I think this is where many coaches are getting stuck, because they are feeling that if emotion arises, they have to do something about it, especially if that's a negative emotion. If a client feels frustrated, if they feel annoyed, angry, bored, coaches are not sure whether they need to do something about it, or what to do, or how to do that. And I've observed many times how coaches walked away from the emotional content exactly because they were not clear about how to approach it. The safest way to proceed is always to stay in the position of a partner and a learner, and not have our own intention to fix emotions in a session, unless the client expresses the need and relevance of transforming their difficult emotion to serve the conversation. Coaching work has two essential elements: the being of coaching and the doing of coaching. And speaking of the doing of coaching, I will definitely share some specific phrases to address emotions emerging in the sessions later in this podcast. However, I do intend to start with a coaching mindset, because all those phrases will not work without a proper inner stance. You really need to trust yourself, your client, and the process. Believe that your client is enough, that they're okay, they're resourceful, they have everything they need to cope with that emotion. You are their thinking partner and not a fixer. You are the learner together with them. This inner capacity is best cultivated through reflective practice and supervision. So if this is not part of your regular practice, do consider it. There's no shortcut for this. You need to have a lived experience of processing this, and ideally with a supervisor. I'd be happy to tell you more about coaching supervision, so do feel free to reach out if you want to learn more. On the doing side of coaching, there are a few skills to master. First is the basic safety rule. Put your own mask on first. The ICF expects coaches to demonstrate confidence in working with strong client emotions. And this confidence does not mean being stoic, keeping a straight face, showing that you are completely undisturbed by any emotions that appear. That would not look very empathetic. So it's all about trusting that emotion is part of learning. Emotion is no danger, it is information. When a client shows strong or conflicting emotion in a session, your first task is to regulate your presence. Know yourself and stay attuned with yourself. Watch your breathing, watch your tone, your body language and posture, so that you appear grounded as well. If you get overwhelmed, you can press your feet into the floor to feel more grounded, or say put one of your hands or both of your hands in your lap to get a sense of your body and feel your body to become more grounded. Another way of grounding could be aligning with a helpful, productive inner stance, your coaching mindset, reminding yourself that you're steady, you trust the process, emotion is learning, emotion is information. Once you truly believe this, your language will reflect that too. You would naturally inquire, what might this feeling be showing you? Remember to acknowledge, normalize, and respect expression of emotion. Hold psychological safety and trust so that your client can stay in self-reflection and agency. We can say something like, it sounds like that really matters to you. What is happening inside as you say this? What do you notice about yourself right now? I do invite you to always ask the client to name their emotion or feeling. You'll notice there is an emotion, but you don't have to name or interpret the emotion. You may simply not guess. And that could sound a bit directive. This could sound like an interpretation for the client, and you don't want to do that. You can always offer a neutral observation, like, I sense there's a lot of energy in that for you. See, you are not naming anything particular. You're noticing the resonance and reflecting back to your client as a piece of information to serve their learning. There's a lot of energy in that. What is it asking you to pay attention to? Or maybe even a comment like, sounds like something deeply important is being touched. What is that? See, you're not naming the emotion, you're allowing your client to respond to it. You're not being directive, but you are being observant and responsive, and you're attuned to the emotional content of the message, not only to the logical content. A good reminder here is to remember that emotions and expressions of emotions can be culturally determined, especially if you coach internationally. A culturally sensitive coach recognizes that emotional expression can vary across backgrounds, and if a client's culture is less emotionally expressive than yours, it doesn't mean that their emotions are less strong. Similarly, if emotional expression looks too intense to you, it doesn't always mean that your client has a storm inside. And I often tell this story, how I observed a Chinese male coach coaching a Mexican female client who was being super expressive with her gestures and body language and facial expressions. And he was observing all that, and he asked her, "Why are you feeling so stressed? What gives you stress?" And she went like, "No, I'm not stressed. That's just how I talk." That was a great learning for everyone. So it's important not to name emotions, but let your clients do that. If you sense that emotion opens a door to your client's values or identity, you can invite the client to follow it by asking them some questions like, "What does this feeling show you about what truly matters?" Or, "What part of you speaks through this emotion?" Partner with a client and explore together. Invite your client to respond by saying something like, "What are you noticing right now? What's coming up for you as you sit with this? What does that feeling want you to notice?" Or, "How does this emotion help you see what matters most?" Well, let's be fair, sometimes emotions may not be helpful. And how do we know that? It's when emotional intensity becomes too high, so high that your client loses their reflective capacity. You'll see that they can't think about the emotion anymore. They can only think from that emotion. They can't articulate. They can only relieve and vent. Once you notice this, you can check if they want to, or if they are ready to, change the dynamic. So you could say something like, "I'm noticing it's hard to step back right now. What would help at the moment?" Or, "Would you like to stay with this for a bit, or would you prefer to shift?" Or, "This seems to bring up a lot. How would you like us to move forward with this?" Questions like this would honor your client's autonomy, which is a cornerstone of the ICF definition of coaching as a partnership. So keep partnering, trust your clients' resourcefulness, demonstrate complete and open trust in the client and the process, and this includes trusting their emotional wisdom. If you feel uncomfortable working with emotions, there could be two possible scenarios. Maybe you feel uneasy, or maybe your client is signaling a shift. It can be either way. So it could be that you are sensing with your intuition that a shift is coming. And in this case, you are capturing this information from the field, from the space between you and the client. And this is valuable session information. And there could be other situations when this feeling, when this uneasiness is coming from you, your inner doubt or your inner dialogue that does not allow you to sit with emotions. A good way to develop emotional self-awareness could be through journaling or even voice reflections immediately after sessions. It would be very helpful to take some notes about how you work with emotions for supervisions or a reflection journal. And this serves both you and the client, especially if cultural expectations around emotions differ. Every emotional moment in coaching could also be a mirror for your own growth. And when you feel discomfort, especially working with emotions, you might ask yourself, what part of me is reacting? Is this my empathy? Is this my fear? Is this my need to help? Is this my need to look good? Or what is that part that's speaking in me and getting into this process between me and my client? To me personally, voice reflections are my everything. I often transcribe my voice notes and analyze them, and this is a great help. I would also really encourage you to explore regular supervision focused on emotional dynamics. A good supervisor would help you differentiate client emotions from coach countertransference. And if you work across cultures, intercultural reflection would matter a lot as well. The beauty in the work, to me personally, lies in the ability to dance with emotion, like you dance with everything, really, in coaching sessions. Not too much stillness, which may invite a kind of a freeze or withdrawal, and not too much steering, which may imply some control. But developing a co-created rhythm with your client experience. So that's it for today. I hope this episode encourages you to be a bit more curious about emotions in your coaching work. The more comfortable we become with emotions, our own and our clients, the more depth, trust, and real change coaching can bring. If you found this useful, share this with another coach or leave a quick comment about what resonated most for you. If you are developing advanced coaching skills and want solid accredited coach training behind you, our next Level 1 and Level 2 programs start this November. These cohorts are designed for coaches who care about depth, presence, and real connection, not just tools or techniques. Our coaching philosophy and approach at Upthink Coaching integrates emotional intelligence, relational coaching, and intercultural intelligence. So we normalize emotion work in coaching, and we teach coaches how to do that effectively. You can learn more and see if it's the right next step for you on our website, www.upthinkcoaching.com. You can also reach out to me directly for mentor coaching or coaching supervision. Next time, we'll talk about something many coaches quietly struggle with: coaches' responsibility versus clients' responsibility. Coaches may sometimes feel like everything in the coaching process rests on their shoulders. In reality, clients have responsibilities too, and naming those clearly can make the whole relationship lighter and more effective. We'll look at what those responsibilities actually are, both for coaches and clients, and how to agree on them in a way that feels natural and respectful. It is a simple shift that can change the energy of your sessions completely. Join me for that conversation. It might just help you coach with a little more ease and a lot more partnership.